Emma needs this more than you do, my father said, not even looking up from the check he was writing to clear my twin sister's $220,000 in student debt. You've always had things come easy. I stood frozen in our family's sunlit kitchen, my brand new medical degree still in its leather portfolio, trying to comprehend how my parents could dismiss 8 years of my relentless work, sleepless nights, and perfect grades with such casual cruelty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I watched as my father's Mont Blanc pen glided across the check, the amount making my stomach twist. $220,000. Enough to free my sister Emma from the burden of medical school debt. The exact same burden I was still carrying. The kitchen was bright, with May sunshine streaming through the windows, illuminating the granite countertops my parents had installed during their recent renovation. Family photos lined the refrigerator, Emma's graduation portrait prominently displayed in the center, mine tucked near the bottom corner. Some things never changed. Dad, we both graduated with honors, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the hurt lodged in my throat. We both earned our MDs from Stanford. We both worked incredibly hard. I don't understand why you and Mom would clear Emma's loans but not mine. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. 8 years of medical training had taught me to maintain composure under pressure, but this was testing my limits. My mother sighed, setting down her coffee mug. She had that look, the one that always preceded a lecture about how I needed to be more understanding of my sister. Her pearl earrings caught the light as she tilted her head. Lily, sweetie, you know your sister struggles with anxiety. The pressure of those loans hanging over her head would be devastating. You've always been the stronger one. The stronger one. The code they'd used my entire life to justify giving Emma more support, more attention, more of everything, including, apparently, financial freedom. So I'm being punished for being resilient? I asked, feeling the familiar sting of tears threatening to form. For not having panic attacks before exams? For finding ways to cope with stress? My father finally looked up, his expression a mixture of impatience and dismissal. His reading glasses sat low on his nose, the same way they had when he'd review our report cards growing up, praising Emma's B+ while barely acknowledging my straight A's. No one's punishing you, Lily. We're just being practical. Your sister needs a clean slate to start her career without that burden. Besides, you've got that research position with Dr. Nadim. You'll be fine. Dr. Amara Nadim, the brilliant neurosurgeon who had taken me under her wing during my final year of medical school. The mentor I'd earned through countless extra hours, in the lab while Emma took weekend trips home for my parents' nurturing. The woman who saw potential in me that my own family seemed blind to. That position pays a standard resident's salary, I explained for what felt like the 100th time. It's prestigious, but it doesn't make me rich. I'll still be paying off those loans for the next 15 years. My mother brushed an invisible crumb from the counter, avoiding my eyes. Well, we simply don't have enough to pay off both of your loans. We had to make a choice. A choice that, unsurprisingly, favored Emma. Just like when they'd bought her a new car for getting into medical school while I received a used laptop. Or when they'd flown across the country for her white coat ceremony but missed mine due to a neighbor's retirement party. You could have split it, I suggested, the words coming out more sharply than intended. Helped us both partially, instead of her completely. My father closed his checkbook with a snap. That wouldn't have solved Emma's anxiety about debt, would it? This way, at least one of you gets a fresh start. And of course, that one would be Emma. Always Emma. Well, my mother said with finality, brushing her hands together as if wiping away the entire conversation. We've made our decision. Emma's celebration dinner is tomorrow night at Castellanos. 8 o'clock. You'll be there, right? The celebration dinner. Of course, they'd planned a special evening to commemorate Emma's debt-free status. A status gifted to her rather than earned. I'd received a text invitation 3 days ago, the wording making it clear this was Emma's night, not a joint celebration of our identical achievements. Celebrating Emma's debt-free future, the invitation had read, with a photo of her, in her graduation gown. I have a night shift, I lied, unable to imagine sitting through a dinner watching my family toast to Emma's bright, debt-free future while mine remained anchored by loans. The thought of smiling through yet another event where my accomplishments were secondary made my chest physically ache. Lily. My mother's voice took on the disappointed tone I knew so well, the one that had followed me through childhood whenever I failed to accommodate Emma's needs. This is important to your sister. Surely you can switch shifts for one night. I thought of the countless times I'd rearranged my schedule to attend Emma's events, while my achievements were treated as afterthoughts. The asymmetry of our families' dynamics had become so normal that they couldn't even see it anymore. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a welcome interruption. Dr. Nadim's name flashed on the screen. Need to speak with you ASAP about the Westbrook Fellowship. Big news. I stared at the message, a strange calm washing over me. The Westbrook Fellowship, the most prestigious neurosurgical research opportunity in the country, only awarded to one graduating medical student nationwide each year. I'd applied months ago, never daring to hope. The fellowship that would place me at Johns Hopkins under the mentorship of the country's top neurosurgeons. I have to go, I said, tucking my phone away. Hospital emergency. My parents exchanged knowing looks, the same looks they'd given each other throughout my childhood whenever I chose studying over family game night or lab research over holiday gatherings. The looks that said, "There goes Lily, always prioritizing her career over family." Your sister will be disappointed if you miss tomorrow, my mother called after me as I gathered my bag. Family should come first, Lily. Family. The word tasted bitter. Where was this devotion to family when I'd presented my research at the national conference and sat alone in the audience without a single relative to support me? I'll try my best, I said non-committally, already heading for the door. If only they knew what was coming. The Westbrook Fellowship included complete loan forgiveness. If Dr. Nadim's message meant what I thought it did, tomorrow's celebration dinner was about to become significantly more complicated. As I drove away from my parents' suburban home in Palo Alto, the weight of years of unequal treatment pressed on my chest. My twin sister Emma and I had been on divergent paths since the moment we entered medical school. But the truth was, the pattern had been established long before that. And now, everything was about to change in ways my parents never saw coming. Preparing. And narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My twin sister Emma and I had been on strangely divergent paths since the day we were born. According to our mother's favorite story, I arrived first, silent and observant with wide eyes taking in the bright hospital lights. Emma followed 7 minutes later, announcing her arrival with strong, healthy cries that echoed through the delivery room. Even then, you were the quiet one, our mother would say, and Emma needed more attention. That pattern established in our first minutes of life would define our childhood in Palo Alto, where our father worked as a corporate attorney and our mother ran a successful interior design business. Our parents' combined success afforded us a comfortable upper-middle-class life in one of California's most expensive zip codes. Private school education, summer camps, music lessons, and eventually, college tuition. The drive from my parents' house to my small apartment near Stanford Medical Center took 20 minutes, but it felt like crossing a boundary between two different realities. In one, I was forever the self-sufficient daughter who needed less. In the other, I was Dr. Lily Chen, promising neurosurgical resident with a future limited only by the crushing weight of educational debt. I pulled into my assigned parking space and checked my phone again. Dr. Nadim had sent another message. In my office until 6 p.m., Come when you can. Stepping into my apartment, I allowed myself a small smile at the neat, organized space. Unlike the cluttered, homey chaos of my parents' house, my apartment was minimalist and practical, much like my approach to life. A stack of neurology journals sat on the coffee table next to a half-empty mug of yesterday's coffee. The walls were mostly bare except for my framed undergraduate diploma and a single photograph of Emma and me on our first day of medical school, arms around each, other's shoulders, identical hopeful smiles on our faces. 4 years ago, before the subtle competition began, before our parents' favoritism, present throughout our childhood, became even more pronounced in our professional lives. I opened my laptop and pulled up my student loan account. The numbers stared back at me. 217,453.26. Almost identical to Emma's now vanished debt. 8 years of higher education, 4 years at Berkeley followed by Stanford Medical School, had left both of us with massive financial burdens. The only difference was that Emma's had just disappeared with the stroke of our father's pen. I clicked through my email, finding the most recent one from the Westbrook Fellowship Committee. Their decision date had been listed as late May, and here we were, May 23rd. Dr. Nadim's message could only mean one thing. The committee had made their decision. As I changed from casual clothes into more professional attire to meet my mentor, memories from our medical school years surfaced unbidden. Emma and I had started medical school on seemingly equal footing. We'd both excelled in our undergraduate studies, though I'd graduated summa cum laude while Emma managed magna cum laude, a distinction our parents never seemed to notice. "You're both so smart," they'd say, as if our different achievements were identical. The first cracks in our parallel paths appeared during anatomy lab in our first year. Emma struggled with the physicality of dissection, the formaldehyde making her nauseous, the late-night study sessions leaving her anxious and sleep-deprived. I thrived in the challenging environment, fascinated by the intricate neural pathways and complex structures of the human brain. By second year, our academic trajectories had diverged further. I gravitated toward neurosurgery, a field dominated by men with reputations for brutal work hours and uncompromising standards. Emma found her niche in dermatology, still competitive, but known for more manageable hours and better work-life balance. A much more practical choice for a woman. "Who wants a family someday?" our mother had commented when Emma announced her specialty choice. The implied criticism of my career path hung in the air, unaddressed. When Emma had struggled with her Step 1 board exams, our parents had paid for an expensive private tutor and a 6-week dedicated study program. When I was preparing for the big, same exam 6 weeks later, they assumed I would be fine on my own. "You always figure things out, Lily," my father had said when I mentioned the study program. I did figure it out, scoring in the 99th percentile without their help. Emma had passed comfortably in the 85th percentile with all the extra support, a good score that had our parents beaming with pride. My score announcement had been met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear," as they focused on planning a celebration dinner for Emma's successful exam passage. The pattern continued through clinical rotations, residency applications, and finally, graduation. Different standards, different levels of support, different recognition for our achievements. I grabbed my keys and headed out, Dr. Nadim's message pulling me from the spiral of resentful memories. Whatever news she had about the Westbrook Fellowship, it might finally change the dynamics that had defined my life for 28 years. Dr. Amara Nadim's office at Stanford Medical Center reflected her status as one of the nation's top neurosurgeons. Large windows overlooked the medical campus. Bookshelves lined with medical texts and research journals covered one wall, and her numerous awards and recognitions were tastefully displayed on another. Unlike many of her colleagues, she'd kept her office warm and inviting, comfortable seating, soft lighting, and always a pot of excellent Arabic coffee brewing in the corner. "Lily, come in," she called when I knocked on her open door. "Doctor." Nadim was a striking woman in her 50s, with olive skin, sharp dark eyes, and hair she kept in a practical but elegant silver bob. Today she wore surgical scrubs under her white coat. She'd likely come straight from the OR. "I got your message," I said, taking the seat she gestured toward. "About the Westbrook Fellowship?" Dr. Nadim poured 2 cups of coffee before sitting. Across from me, her expression unreadable. I'd spent 2 years working with this brilliant woman, and she still had the ability to maintain a perfect poker face when needed. "The committee made their decision yesterday," she said, sliding 1 coffee cup toward me. "I received their call this morning." My heart pounded so hard I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The Westbrook Fellowship would open doors that might otherwise take years to access. It would place me at Johns Hopkins under Dr. Leon Farber, the pioneer of minimally invasive techniques for previously inoperable brain tumors. It would forgive my loans. It would validate every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I'd pushed myself beyond exhaustion. "They've selected you, Lily." The words hung in the air between us as I processed them. Me. They'd chosen me out of hundreds of applicants nationwide. "Are you serious?" I whispered, my voice failing me. Dr. Nadim smiled then, the serious mentor persona falling away to reveal genuine pride. "Completely serious. The committee was particularly impressed with your research on neuroplasticity in traumatic brain injury patients. Dr. Farber specifically mentioned your innovative approach to the cortical regeneration study." The cortical regeneration study, the one I'd designed and executed largely on my own, spending countless weekends in the lab while Emma went home for family dinners. The study our parents had been too busy to hear about when I tried to explain its significance over Christmas. Break. "I don't know what to say," I managed, emotion tightening my throat. "Say you'll accept," Dr. Nadim replied. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Lily." "Of course I accept," I said, a smile finally breaking through my shock. "It's the Westbrook. It's everything I've worked for." Dr. Nadim's expression softened further. "You earned this, Lily. Not through connections or luck or privilege, but through exceptional work and dedication." She hesitated, then added, "I know recognition hasn't always come easily in other areas of your life." The statement caught me off guard. I'd never explicitly discussed my family dynamics with my mentor, though I suspected she'd observed enough over the years to draw her own conclusions. "The fellowship includes full loan forgiveness, doesn't it?" I asked, still processing the implications. "Complete forgiveness," Dr. Nadim confirmed, "plus a stipend that's roughly double the standard resident salary. You'll be comfortable in Baltimore." Comfortable, and unexpectedly debt-free, just like Emma. Except in my case, it would be earned rather than given. "There's something else," Dr. Nadim said, her tone shifting slightly. "I received an invitation to your sister's celebration dinner, tomorrow night." I blinked in surprise. "You did?" She nodded. "Your parents invited several faculty members, apparently not realizing our connection. I suspect they're quite proud of having paid off her student loans and want to share that accomplishment with her professors." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. My parents had inadvertently invited the one person who knew exactly how the scales had always been tipped in Emma's favor. "Will you attend?" I asked hesitantly. "I'm considering it," Dr. Nadim replied, studying me carefully. "It might be an appropriate venue to announce the Westbrook news if you're comfortable with that." My stomach tightened at the thought. Emma's celebration dinner, meant to highlight her debt-free status thanks to our parents' generosity, would be overshadowed by the announcement that I'd earned an even more prestigious debt forgiveness, through merit alone. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's supposed to be Emma's night, and my parents might see it as me trying to steal her spotlight." Dr. Nadim set her coffee cup down with a decisive click. "Lily, I've observed your family dynamics from a distance for 2 years now. I've noticed the patterns, the different standards applied to you and your sister. Sometimes recognition needs to be public to be properly acknowledged. She was right, of course. If my parents heard about the Westbrook privately, they'd find a way to minimize it or attribute it to luck rather than achievement. The same way they'd dismissed my perfect MCAT score, my summa cum laude graduation, my research publications. Okay. I nodded slowly, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety swirling in my chest. You can announce it at the dinner. As I left Dr. Nadim's office 30 minutes later, after discussing logistics for my transition to Johns Hopkins, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom's going completely overboard for tomorrow. It's embarrassing. Wish she'd put this much effort into celebrating both of us graduating. See you there? I stared at the message, confused. It was the first time Emma had ever acknowledged our parents' unequal treatment. Before I could formulate a response, another text came through. This one from my mother. Don't forget, cocktail attire for tomorrow night. And please, Lily, let your sister have her moment. This is very important to her. The contrast between the two messages was jarring. Perhaps I had been wrong about Emma all along, and perhaps tomorrow night would reveal truths my parents had been avoiding for 28 years. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect California spring day that belied the emotional storm brewing within me. I had the day off from the hospital, a rare luxury I'd planned to spend preparing for my upcoming presentation at the neurosurgical conference in Chicago. Instead, I found myself staring at my closet, contemplating what to wear to a celebration of my sister's good fortune. My phone rang, displaying Emma's name. We'd always been close despite our parents' differential treatment, a bond forged in the shared womb that even years of subtle competition couldn't fully erode. Hey, I answered, trying to keep my tone neutral. Lily, Emma's voice sounded strained. Are you really coming tonight? Mom said you tried to get out of it. I sighed, dropping onto the edge of my bed. I'll be there, just had to switch some things around. There was a pause, the sound of a door closing on Emma's end. Listen, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice lowered. I tried to get them to split the money between us. I really did. Dad wouldn't even discuss it. This admission caught me off guard. You did? Of course I did. Emma sounded genuinely hurt that I would think otherwise. It's completely unfair. We both worked our asses off through med school. We both have the same loans. I don't understand why they're doing this. I pressed my fingers against my closed eyelids, a headache threatening to form. Because you're their priority, Em. You've always been their priority. That's not true, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Remember when I presented my research at the National Medical Conference in our third year? I asked quietly. Of course, your cortical regeneration study. And remember what happened that weekend? A pause. I got that community service award from the Student Association. Which event did Mom and Dad attend? Another, longer pause. Mine, Emma admitted softly. But they said your presentation was too technical for them to understand anyway. And when we both got our Step 1 results? Lily, stop. I get it. No, I don't think you do, I continued, years of suppressed frustration finding an outlet. They threw you a dinner party for scoring in the 85th percentile after paying for that expensive prep course. Do you know what they said when I told them I scored in the 99th percentile without any help? That's nice, dear. Can you pass the salt? Emma was quiet for a moment. I never wanted it to be this way, she finally said, her voice small. I've always been so proud of you, Lily. Sometimes I think they favor me because they know I'm not as capable as you are. Not as strong. The admission hung in the air between us. For the first time, I considered that perhaps Emma's perception of our parents' favoritism differed significantly from mine. Where I saw preferential treatment, she might see compensation for perceived inadequacy. That's not true, I said firmly. You're an incredible doctor, Em. Your patients adore you. But I'm not you, she replied simply. I never have been. I don't have your focus, your determination. I don't make it look effortless the way you do. Trust me, none of it has been effortless, I said with a hollow laugh. I know, Emma said, quietly. That's why I hate this whole celebration dinner thing. It feels gross, like they're celebrating something I didn't earn while ignoring everything you did earn. My twin's insight surprised me. After years of assuming Emma was either oblivious to or complicit in our parents' favoritism, discovering her awareness and discomfort shifted something in my understanding of our family dynamic. I have some news, I said impulsively, not wanting to drop the Westbrook bomb at dinner without at least warning my sister. Big news, actually. What is it? Emma asked, curiosity evident in her voice. I got the Westbrook Fellowship. The Westbrook? She gasped. Lily, that's incredible. That's the most prestigious neurosurgical research fellowship in the country, yes? I finished. One recipient nationwide. Full funding for 3 years at Johns Hopkins plus what? Complete loan forgiveness, I said quietly. The silence that followed was loaded with understanding. So you'll be debt-free too, Emma said slowly. But you earned it. Dr. Nadim is planning to announce it at your dinner tonight, I admitted. She was invited by Mom and Dad. They don't know about my connection to her. To my surprise, Emma laughed, a genuine, delighted sound I hadn't heard from her in months. Oh my God, Lily, that's perfect. Can you imagine their faces? This is the best thing I've heard all year. Her reaction was so unexpected and so supportive that I found myself laughing too, releasing some of the tension I'd been carrying. You're not upset that it might overshadow your dinner? Are you kidding? I'm thrilled. It's not even my dinner. It's Mom and Dad's performative generosity. Dinner. Having Dr. Nadim announce your fellowship will finally force them to acknowledge what everyone else already knows, that you're exceptional. For the first time since learning about my parents' decision to pay off only Emma's loans, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Whatever happened tonight, I knew my twin was in my corner. After speaking with Emma, I drove to Stanford Medical Center for a meeting with the other residents. The hospital was my true home in many ways, the place where my identity as Dr. Lily Chen superseded all other roles and expectations. Here, I wasn't the underappreciated twin or the self-sufficient daughter. I was a promising neurosurgical resident with a bright future ahead. My phone buzzed as I walked through the hospital's main entrance. Dr. Nadim again. Coffee before your meeting? Need to discuss something. We met in the doctor's lounge 20 minutes later. Dr. Nadim was reviewing charts but looked up with a smile when I entered. Lily, she greeted me, closing the file. How are you processing the Westbrook news? Still in shock, I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the communal pot. Nothing like Dr. Nadim's Arabic brew, but caffeine was caffeine. I spoke with my sister this morning. She's actually supportive about the announcement tonight. Dr. Nadim raised an eyebrow. That's encouraging. I've been thinking more about the dinner, and I wanted to discuss an adjustment to our plan. I took the seat across from her, curious. What kind of adjustment? After our conversation yesterday, I did some research into your family's connections in the medical community, she said carefully. Your father's law firm represents several major hospital systems, including Detroit Medical Center. Yes, I confirmed. He specializes in healthcare litigation. And your mother designs medical offices and hospital interiors. I nodded, uncertain where this was heading. I noticed that Dr. Margaret Wu, Chief of Dermatology at UCSF, will be attending tonight's dinner, Dr. Nadim continued, as will Dr. James Hartley, the residency director at Stanford Dermatology. The implications clicked into place. You think my parents invited them for Emma? It would be a natural assumption, Dr. Nadim said diplomatically. Your sister is pursuing dermatology, and these are influential figures in that specialty in the Bay Area. The familiar sting of injustice flared again. Of course, my parents would leverage their connections to advantage Emma, while I'd been left to forge my own path. I've never expected them to use their connections for me, I said stiffly. I've earned everything through merit. And that speaks to your character, Dr. Nadim agreed. But there's a difference between not expecting favoritism and accepting blatant disparities in support. I frowned, considering her words. What's the adjustment to our plan? I've invited several additional guests, Dr. Nadim said, a hint of strategic satisfaction in her voice. Dr. Leon Farber from Johns Hopkins will be in town for a consultation. As the Westbrook program director, he's eager to meet you and thought tonight would be a perfect opportunity. My eyes widened. Dr. Farber is coming to the dinner? Along with Dr. Sarah Patel, the chief of neurosurgery at Stanford, and Dr. William Chen from UCSF Neurosurgery. No relation to you, I presume? No, I said faintly, processing what she was saying. You invited the chiefs of neurosurgery from Stanford and UCSF to my sister's debt celebration dinner. Dr. Nadim's eyes held a steely determination I'd seen many times in the operating room when she faced particularly challenging procedures. Balance, Lily. Your parents have been tipping the scales in your sister's favor for years. Tonight, the medical community will help rebalance that equation. I felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. My parents will see this as an orchestrated coup. Perhaps, she acknowledged. Or perhaps they'll finally see that their daughters should be measured by the same standards. I don't want to hurt Emma, I said quietly. Based on your earlier conversation, it sounds like your sister understands the situation better than you've given her credit for, Dr. Nadim pointed out. This isn't about diminishing her achievements. It's about ensuring yours are properly recognized. Outside the doctor's lounge, a code blue announcement echoed through the PA system. Dr. Nadim stood smoothly, checking her pager. That's in neuro ICU, she noted. We should go. As we hurried toward the elevators, she added, Whatever happens, tonight, Lily, remember this. You've earned the Westbrook on your merits. No one can take that away from you, regardless of how they may try to minimize it. The confidence in her voice bolstered me. For years, I'd navigated medical school and residency without the emotional safety net my parents consistently provided for Emma. Instead, I'd found mentorship and validation in Dr. Nadim, a more valuable support system in many ways, because it was based on recognition of my abilities rather than familial obligation. As we entered the neuro ICU to respond to the code, the complexities of family dynamics faded against the immediate demands of patient care. Here, in the realm of medicine where skill and knowledge were the only currencies that mattered, I was on solid ground. Tonight's dinner would force a reckoning that had been brewing for 28 years. With Dr. Nadim and the medical community's elite as witnesses, my parents would finally have to acknowledge what everyone else already saw, that both their daughters were exceptional in their own ways and both deserved recognition and support. Whether they would rise to that challenge remained to be seen. The code blue in the neuro ICU turned out to be Mr. Ramirez, a 62-year-old patient recovering from the removal of a meningioma, a procedure I had assisted Dr. Nadim with 3 days earlier. His blood pressure had spiked dangerously, triggering a seizure. For the next 2 hours, I worked alongside Dr. Nadim to stabilize him, my mind fully focused on the medical crisis at hand rather than my personal one. By the time Mr. Ramirez was stable, it was nearly 3 p.m. I had only a few hours before Emma's celebration dinner at Castellanos, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Palo Alto, where reservations typically had to be made months in advance. The fact that my parents had secured a private dining room on short notice spoke to their connections and willingness to spend extravagantly to celebrate Emma. Go home and prepare for tonight, Dr. Nadim told me as we finished updating Mr. Ramirez's chart. I'll monitor his condition. I hesitated. I could stay. Monitor his post-seizure EEG patterns. She gave me a knowing look. You're not avoiding the dinner, Lily. Mr. Ramirez will be fine. This is an important night for your professional future. And for my family dynamics, I added with a grimace. That too, she agreed. Sometimes personal and professional reckonings arrive simultaneously. Back in my apartment, I stared at the cocktail dresses hanging in my closet. What does one wear to a dinner celebrating a sibling's debt-free status when you're about to announce your own, more prestigious financial freedom? I finally settled on a deep blue sheath dress, conservative enough for a family dinner, but professional enough for what was increasingly feeling like a career milestone. As I applied minimal makeup, my phone chimed with texts from extended family members who would be attending tonight. So proud of your sister. What an amazing graduation gift from your parents, Aunt Cynthia. You must be so happy for Emma. Will you be joining us tonight? Uncle Robert. Heard your folks paid off Emma's med school loans. So generous. Did they help with yours? Too. Cousin May I set the phone face down without responding. None of them knew about the Westbrook yet. None of them had reached out after our graduation ceremony to congratulate me specifically. In our family narrative, Emma and I were often treated as a unit. The twins. Except when it came to parental support and recognition, where Emma consistently received the larger share. My reflection stared back at me from the bathroom. Mirror, and I tried to see myself as others might. At 28, Emma and I still looked remarkably similar. The same almond-shaped brown eyes, high cheekbones, and straight black hair, though I kept mine longer while Emma wore hers in a fashionable bob. People who didn't know us well still had trouble telling us apart. Yet those closest to us had always treated us very differently. I thought of the upcoming dinner, imagining the scene. My parents proudly introducing Emma to medical colleagues, extended family congratulating her, the inevitable toast to her bright, debt-free future. And then Dr. Nadim rising to announce the Westbrook, changing the carefully choreographed narrative in an instant. Part of me, a small vindictive part I wasn't proud of, anticipated the moment with satisfaction. Finally, my parents would be forced to acknowledge my achievements in a public setting. Finally, the family members who had always accepted my parents' favoritism would see the reality. But another part hesitated. Was I stooping to their level by orchestrating this public revelation? Was I being unfair to Emma, who, based on our conversation this morning, seemed to understand and even resent our parents' imbalanced treatment? I picked up my phone again, scrolling to find my most recent conversation with my twin. About tonight, I texted. Dr. Nadim is bringing several neurosurgery department heads, including Dr. Farber from Johns Hopkins. The Westbrook announcement might be bigger than we anticipated. Are you sure you're okay with this? Emma's response came quickly. More than okay. Bring on the department heads. Mom invited half the dermatology department to network for me anyway. It's about time they saw what you've accomplished. Her support was touching, but complicated. My feelings further. If Emma wasn't the willing beneficiary of our parents' favoritism, if she was, in some ways, as uncomfortable with it as I was, then who was I really confronting tonight? As I finished getting ready, my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. I answered with trepidation. Lily, he said, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he'd perfected over decades of litigation. Your mother tells me you're planning to attend tonight after all? That's right, I confirmed. I switched my shift. Good, good. He cleared his throat. Listen, Dr. Margaret Wu will be there, the chief of dermatology at UCSF, very influential in the residency matching process. It would mean a lot to your sister if you could help make her look good. I gripped the phone tighter, disbelief washing over me. Help make her look good? Mention her strengths, her volunteer work at the free clinic, that sort of thing. Dr. Wu could be instrumental in securing Emma a position in their dermatology program. The audacity was breathtaking. Not only had they paid off Emma's loans while leaving me saddled with equivalent debt, not only had they arranged a celebration dinner exclusively for her achievement, which was really theirs, but now my father was explicitly asking me to advocate for my sister to influential medical professionals, with no awareness that I might have my own professional opportunities to pursue. "Dad," I said carefully, measuring each word, "did it occur to you that I might have my own connections in the medical community? My own career to advance?" A pause. "Well, of course. But you've always been so self-sufficient, Lily. Emma needs more support with these things." There it was again, the familiar refrain that had shaped our lives. Emma needs more. You need less. Emma struggles. You succeed. Therefore, our support goes to Emma. "I'll see you at Castellanos at 8, I said flatly, ending the call before I said something I'd regret. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in hand, a complex swirl of emotions churning inside me. Anger at my parents' persistent blindness. Gratitude for Dr. Nadim's unwavering support. Appreciation for Emma's surprising solidarity. Anxiety about the evening ahead. And beneath it all, a deep-seated hurt that had accumulated over decades of being the less favored twin. My thoughts turned to the Westbrook Fellowship and what it represented. Beyond the professional prestige and financial relief, it offered something I'd never fully received from my family: recognition based solely on merit. Dr. Farber and the selection committee hadn't chosen me because I was someone's daughter or sister. They'd chosen me because my research and clinical skills had impressed them, because I had earned it. Perhaps that was the real source of my internal conflict. Part of me had always sought my parents' approval and recognition, the natural desire of a child to be valued by those who raised her. But another part had found validation in the meritocratic world of medicine, where achievements were measured by objective standards rather than familial dynamics. Tonight, those two worlds would collide in ways I couldn't fully predict. The buzzing of my phone interrupted my thoughts. A message from Dr. Nadim. "Dr. Farber's flight landed. We'll meet you at Castellanos at 7:45. Remember, you've earned this moment." I took a deep breath, straightened my dress, and gathered my purse and keys. Whatever happened tonight, it would change the course of both my professional and personal life. There was no avoiding the confrontation that had been building for years. The drive to Castellanos took 20 minutes, the familiar route along Palm Drive and through downtown Palo Alto, giving me time to organize my thoughts. The restaurant was housed in a renovated historic building, its stone facade illuminated by tasteful lighting. Valets in crisp uniforms waited to take guests' cars, and through the large windows, I could see the elegant interior with its white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers. I handed my keys to a valet and checked my phone one last time before entering. Another text from Emma. "Just arrived. Mom's already introducing me to every doctor in a 5-mile radius. Dr. Wu is here with her husband. Where are you?" "Just parking." "Be right in," I replied. As I approached the entrance, I spotted Dr. Nadim arriving with 3 distinguished-looking individuals: Dr. Farber, a tall man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes; Dr. Patel, an elegant woman in her 60s who headed Stanford's neurosurgery department; and Dr. Chen, the younger but equally impressive chief from UCSF. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Nadim greeted me warmly. "Perfect timing. Allow me to make the introductions." For the next several minutes, I engaged in conversation with 3 of the most influential neurosurgeons in the country, all of whom knew my research, and spoke of my potential with genuine respect and enthusiasm. Dr. Farber in particular expressed how eager the Johns Hopkins team was to have me join them. "Your work on neural regeneration pathways is exactly the fresh perspective we've been looking for," he said, his eyes alight with academic excitement. The Westbrook Committee was unanimous in their decision, the first time that's happened in 7 years. Their collective approval settled something within me. Whatever reception awaited inside from my family, I carried with me the validation of my chosen profession's most respected figures. "Shall we?" Dr. Nadim suggested, gesturing toward the restaurant's entrance. "I believe we're about to witness a significant evening." As we walked through the doors of Castellanos, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished glass. Shoulders back, head high, a confident professional surrounded by respected colleagues. Tonight, Dr. Lily Chen would step fully into her own light, whether her parents were ready to see it or not. "I'm ready," I said, as much to myself as to my mentors. The maitre d' led us toward the private dining room where Emma's celebration was already underway. Through the partially open door, I could see my parents holding court, my mother elegant in an expensive dress, my father commanding attention as always. Emma stood nearby, smiling politely, but with a tension in her posture I recognized from years of being her twin. Dr. Nadim placed a steadying hand briefly on my arm. "Remember, Lily, this isn't about upstaging your sister or punishing your parents. It's about claiming the recognition you've earned." I nodded, drawing strength from her words. With a deep breath, I stepped through the doorway, crossing the threshold into a new chapter of both my family narrative and my professional future. Castellano's private dining room was a study in opulence. Hand-painted murals adorned the walls, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, and arrangements of white orchids and roses graced every table. A banner hung across one wall. "Congratulations, Dr. Emma Chen, debt-free and ready to soar." The exclamation point seemed to mock me as I entered. My mother spotted me first, her face lighting up with relief. "Lily, you made it." She hurried over, elegant in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. We were beginning to worry. "I had to finish with a patient," I said, accepting her brief hug. "Mom, I'd like you to meet some colleagues." Her eyes widened as she took in the distinguished group behind me. "Oh, I didn't realize you were bringing guests." Dr. Amara Nadim, my mentor, introduced herself smoothly. "We've met briefly at hospital functions. These are my colleagues, Dr. Leon Farber from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Sarah Patel from Stanford, and Dr. William Chen from UCSF. My mother's social training kicked in despite her surprise. "Of course, welcome. I'm Helen Chen, Lily and Emma's mother. Please come in. There's plenty of food and champagne." As she led them toward the bar, I caught my father's eye across the room. His expression shifted from confusion to calculation as he registered the caliber of medical professionals who had arrived with me. Robert Chen was nothing if not strategic, a top healthcare attorney who prided himself on his connections in the medical community. Lily, Emma appeared at my side, resplendent in a silver cocktail dress, her short bob perfectly styled. Despite being identical twins, she had always been more polished, more attuned to appearances. "You brought reinforcements," she whispered, a hint of mischief in her voice. "Dr. Nadim brought reinforcements," I corrected quietly. "I just showed up." "Well, Mom's having a minor stroke trying to figure out why 3 department heads just walked in with you." Emma's grin was conspiratorial. "Dad's recalibrating his entire evening plan. You can practically see him reprogramming in real time." I couldn't help but smile at her assessment. "Are you really okay with this? It's supposed to be your celebration." Emma rolled her eyes. "It's not my celebration. It's Mom and Dad's self-congratulatory party for solving a problem they created." She linked her arm through mine. "Come on. I'll get you a drink. You look like you need one." As we made our way to the bar, I observed the room's dynamics. My extended family clustered in one corner, aunts, uncles, and cousins who had flown in for the occasion. Several of my parents' friends occupied another section, many of them prominent figures in Palo Alto's social scene. The remainder of the guests were medical professionals, Emma's professors and attending physicians, alongside the dermatologists my father had invited to advance her career. Dr. Nadim and her colleagues had been immediately surrounded by curious doctors eager to speak with such prominent figures in their field. My father had wasted no time inserting himself into their conversation, his networking instincts overriding his confusion about their presence. "Your boyfriend couldn't make it?" I asked Emma as she handed me a glass of champagne. "Tyler's at a conference in Chicago," she said, referring to the surgical resident she'd been dating for nearly 2 years. "He wanted to be here, but you know how it is. Medicine first." "I do know," I agreed, taking a sip of the excellent champagne. Top shelf, of course. Nothing but the best for Emma's celebration. "Lily, Emma." Our father's booming voice cut through the background noise as he approached with Dr. Margaret Wu in tow. "Dr. Wu was just asking about you both." Dr. Wu was an elegant woman in her 50s, widely respected in the dermatology community for her research on advanced treatment protocols for melanoma. She smiled warmly at us. "The famous Chen twins," she said. "Your father has been singing your praises all evening." Dr. Wu oversees the dermatology residency program at UCSF. My father explained unnecessarily, his meaning clear. This was an important connection for Emma. "Emma was telling me about her interest in pediatric dermatology," Dr. Wu said. "It's a growing subspecialty with excellent career prospects." "Emma has always had a wonderful way with children," my mother added, joining our circle. "Even as a child herself, she was so nurturing." I resisted the urge to point out that I had spent 6 months volunteering in the pediatric oncology ward during medical school, a fact my parents had barely acknowledged at the time. "And Lily," Dr. Wu turned to me, "your father mentioned you're in neurosurgery?" Before I could answer, my father jumped in. "Yes, Lily's always been drawn to complex technical challenges, different paths for different personalities. Isn't that right, girls?" The subtle implication was clear. Emma had chosen her specialty out of compassion and human connection, while I had chosen mine out of cold intellectual interest. It was an oversimplification that ignored the deep empathy required to work with brain injury patients, but it fit neatly into our parents' narrative about their daughters. "Actually," Dr. Patel's voice cut in as she joined our group, "Lily's research combines technical precision with a profound understanding of patient outcomes. Her work on neuroplasticity and traumatic brain injury patients is changing how we approach recovery timelines." My father blinked, clearly surprised by this unsolicited praise from Stanford's chief of neurosurgery. "Dr. Chen, you didn't mention your daughter was published in the Journal of Neurosurgical Innovation," Dr. Farber added, appearing at Dr. Patel's side. "Her cortical regeneration study was required reading for our residents last semester. My mother's smile faltered slightly. "Lily's always been very dedicated to her studies." "More than dedicated," Dr. Nadim corrected smoothly. "Lily has demonstrated exceptional innovation and insight. That's why she was selected for the Westbrook Fellowship." A momentary silence fell over our small group. My father recovered first. "The Westbrook? Is that a research position?" he asked, his tone carefully modulated to sound informed and interested, though I knew he had no idea what the fellowship entailed. "It's the most prestigious neurosurgical research fellowship in the country," Dr. Farber explained. "One recipient, nationwide each year. Full funding for 3 years at Johns Hopkins, plus complete loan forgiveness." The words loan forgiveness hung in the air like a thunderclap. My mother's champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. Emma, bless her, broke the tension with an enthusiastic response. "Isn't it amazing?" she said brightly. "Lily found out yesterday. I'm so proud of her." You already knew?" my mother asked Emma, confusion evident in her voice. Of course I knew, Emma replied. Lily called me immediately. It's a huge honor. My father's attorney mind was already calculating the implications. Loan forgiveness, he repeated. So you'll be debt-free, I confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. Just like Emma. Another beat of silence. My mother's social training rescued her once again. Well, this calls for a celebration, she declared, with forced brightness. Robert, we should make an announcement, don't you think? Both our girls with such wonderful news. My father's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. Of course. I'll ask the staff to prepare for a toast. As they moved away to speak with the restaurant manager, Emma squeezed my arm. Their faces, she whispered. Priceless. Dr. Wu was looking between us with new interest. I wasn't aware you were twins, she said to me. Your father primarily spoke about Emma when discussing his daughters. I'm not surprised, I said before I could stop myself. Dr. Wu's eyebrow raised slightly, but she didn't comment further. Instead, she turned to Dr. Nadim. The Westbrook is extraordinary. Congratulations on mentoring such a promising surgeon, Lily. Made it easy, Dr. Nadim replied. Her talent was evident from our first research collaboration. As the conversation continued, I noticed my parents in deep discussion with the restaurant manager, their body language tense. My father checked his watch repeatedly, his expression growing increasingly stressed. Their carefully choreographed evening was shifting beneath their feet. Aunt Cynthia approached, pulling me into a tight hug. Lily, your mother just told me about your fellowship. Why didn't you say anything? It just became official, I explained. Well, it's wonderful news, she said, though I detected a note of confusion in her voice. Confusion about why this information was only emerging now, why it hadn't been part of the evening's planned celebration. Around the room, I could see the news spreading as my mother spoke with various guests. The narrative was shifting before my eyes. What had been intended as Emma's solo celebration was transforming into something more complex. My cousin May sidled up next to me. So you're getting your loans forgiven too? She asked bluntly. That's lucky. It's not luck, Dr. Nadim interjected before I could respond. The Westbrook is merit-based. Lily competed against hundreds of candidates nationwide. May blinked, unused to being corrected. Oh, well, congratulations then. As she walked away, Dr. Nadim gave me a knowing look. Family dynamics are fascinating, aren't they? Almost as complex as brain surgery, though not nearly as precise. Across the room, my father clinked a knife against his glass, calling for attention. The private dining room gradually fell silent as guests turned toward him. Emma appeared at my side, standing shoulder to shoulder with me in a show of solidarity that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you all for coming tonight, my father began, his lawyer's voice perfectly modulated to project authority and warmth. Helen and I are so grateful to have such wonderful friends and family here to celebrate with us. He paused, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. Something flickered across his face, an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Discomfort? Realization? Regret? We gathered tonight to celebrate Emma's accomplishment in completing medical school, he continued, and to mark her debt-free start to her dermatology career. Another pause. My mother stepped closer to him, her smile fixed firmly in place. But it seems we have even more to celebrate than we realized, my father added. Our daughter Lily has received some extraordinary news of her own. The room's attention shifted to me. I stood straighter, feeling Dr. Nadim's steady presence behind me and Emma's supportive arm linked through mine. Apparently, my father said, a slight edge creeping into his voice, Lily has been awarded something called the Westbrook Fellowship, a prestigious position at Johns Hopkins that includes complete loan forgiveness. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Emma squeezed my arm encouragingly. So it seems, my father concluded with a tight smile, that both our daughters will be starting their medical careers debt-free. though through very different paths. The subtle dig wasn't lost on me. Different paths. My path being less worthy because it hadn't involved their direct financial support. But before I could dwell on it, Dr. Farber stepped forward. "If I might add something to this celebration," he said, his authoritative voice immediately commanding attention. "The Westbrook Fellowship is more than just loan forgiveness. It represents the pinnacle of achievement for a graduating medical student entering neurosurgical research." The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on Dr. Farber, a commanding presence whose reputation preceded him even among non-medical guests. "In my 30 years overseeing this fellowship," he continued, "I have never seen a more impressive candidate than Dr. Lily Chen. Her research has already changed how we approach neural regeneration in trauma patients, and her potential is, quite frankly, extraordinary." My parents stood frozen, their expressions a complex mixture of surprise, confusion, and the beginning of something that looked remarkably like recognition. Dr. Nadim stepped forward next to Dr. Farber. "I've had the privilege of mentoring Lily for the past 2 years," she said. "In that time, I've observed her exceptional clinical skills, research innovation, and compassionate patient care. The Westbrook Selection Committee was unanimous in their decision, a rare occurrence that speaks to Lily's truly remarkable abilities." The narrative was being rewritten before my parents' eyes, and everyone else's. The daughter they had, consistently underestimated, was being publicly recognized as exceptional by some of the most respected figures in medicine. Emma released my arm and walked to stand by our father. "I think this calls for a proper toast," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "To my brilliant twin sister, Dr. Lily Chen, Westbrook Fellow and the hardest-working doctor I know." Glasses raised across the room. "To Dr. Lily Chen," voices echoed. My mother's eyes met mine across the crowd, her expression unreadable. For perhaps the first time in my life, I realized she was seeing me, truly seeing me, not as the self-sufficient twin who needed less attention, but as an accomplished individual in my own right. Whether that realization would change anything remained to be seen. After the toast, the evening's dynamic shifted palpably. What had been planned as Emma's celebration had transformed into something more complex, a recognition of both Chen twins' achievements, albeit through very different paths. Guests began approaching me with renewed interest, many asking about the Westbrook Fellowship and my research. Several admitted they hadn't realized the extent of my accomplishments. "Your cortical regeneration paper was groundbreaking," Dr. Wu said, surprising me by seeking me out. "I referenced it in a dermatology context, neural pathways in keloid formation." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely pleased by her interest. "I didn't realize it had applications in dermatology." "Good research transcends specialty boundaries," she observed, then added more quietly, "Your sister speaks very highly of you, you know. She mentioned your work several times before your parents steered the conversation back to her dermatology interests." This revelation warmed me. Emma had been advocating for me even when I wasn't present. Across the room, I could see my parents circulating among guests, their social masks firmly in place. My mother laughed at something Aunt Cynthia said, while my father engaged in animated conversation with one of his attorney colleagues. To casual observers, they appeared to be hosting a successful celebration. But I knew them well enough to recognize the tension in my mother's shoulders and the slightly forced quality of my father's smile. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Farber approached with a plate of hors d'oeuvres. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you considered where you'll live in Baltimore? The Hopkins Housing Office can assist, but many of our fellows prefer to find their own accommodations in Fells Point or Canton." As we discussed Baltimore neighborhoods, I noticed Emma extracting herself from a conversation with our parents to join us. "Dr. Farber," she greeted him warmly, "I hope you don't mind me interrupting. I wanted to ask about the practical aspects of Lily moving to Baltimore. Our parents are concerned about her being so far from family." Her emphasis on the word concerned carried an unmistakable note of irony. Dr. Farber, picking up on the subtext, replied diplomatically, "The Hopkins neurosurgical community becomes something of a family itself. We take care of our own. And of course, Dr. Chen will have housing and transportation arrangements fully covered by the fellowship." "Fully covered," Emma repeated, glancing meaningfully toward our parents, who were now watching our conversation from across the room. How wonderful. Lily's always been so independent, but it's nice to know she'll have support systems in place. I realized what Emma was doing, deliberately highlighting the comprehensive support I would receive from the Westbrook, support our parents had never offered me. The subtle confrontation in her approach surprised and touched me. "The fellowship also includes a substantial stipend," Dr. Farber added, apparently catching on to Emma's strategy, "well above standard resident compensation. And of course, the loan forgiveness component is immediate upon acceptance." "Immediate loan forgiveness," Emma echoed. "So Lily is actually debt-free as of yesterday, then?" "That's correct," Dr. Farber confirmed. "The paperwork has already been processed." Emma's smile was dazzling. "So we're both celebrating being debt-free tonight. What perfect timing. Our father chose that moment to approach, a fresh drink in hand. "Dr. Farber, I hope you're enjoying the evening," he said smoothly. "We're so pleased you could join us for Emma's celebration." "And Lily's," Emma added pointedly. "Since we're both now officially debt-free doctors?" My father's smile tightened slightly. "Of course. Both our daughters have found their paths." "Different paths to the same destination," Dr. Farber noted. "Both quite impressive in their own right." My father nodded, unable to disagree with someone of Dr. Farber's stature. "Helen and I have always encouraged the girls to pursue their individual strengths," he said, the practiced line rolling easily off his tongue. Emma made a small noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. "Dad, Dr. Farber was just explaining that Lily's fellowship includes housing, transportation, and a substantial stipend in addition to the loan forgiveness. Isn't that thoughtful? Such comprehensive support for a young doctor starting her career." The pointed comparison to our parents' one-sided financial support hung in the air. My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Very generous," he agreed. "The medical community takes care of its rising stars." "Yes," Emma said sweetly. "Everyone should have that kind of support, don't you think?" I stared at my twin, in amazement. Never before had she so directly challenged our parents' favoritism. For years, I had assumed she was either oblivious to it or complicit in it. Now, I was witnessing her deliberately highlighting the disparity, using this public setting to force our father to confront his unequal treatment of his daughters. Dr. Farber, sensing the family tension, excused himself tactfully. As he walked away, my father turned to Emma with a frown. "What was that about?" he asked in a low voice. "What was what about, Dad?" Emma returned innocently. "You know perfectly well, that comment about support." Emma sipped her champagne calmly. "I just think it's interesting that the Westbrook Committee saw Lily's value immediately and provided comprehensive support for her career, while her own parents—" She let the sentence hang unfinished. My father's face flushed. "That's unfair, Emma. We've supported both of you throughout your education." "Differently," I added quietly, finding my voice. "You've supported us differently." "Because you had different needs," he insisted, the familiar justification emerging automatically. "Did we?" Emma challenged. "Or did you just decide that I needed more because I expressed my stress more openly? Lily internalized everything. She always has. But that doesn't mean she didn't need the same support you gave me." My father looked between us, momentarily at a loss for words. A rare state for a man who argued complex legal cases for a living. "Your mother and I made the decisions we thought were best," he finally said. "Based on what?" I asked. "Because from where I stand, It looks like you decided early on that I needed less attention, less support, less recognition, and then used my resulting self-sufficiency to justify continuing that pattern. That's not fair, my father protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Emma countered. You paid for my MCAT prep course but told Lily to use free online resources. You flew to my white coat ceremony but missed hers for the Hendersons' retirement party. You paid off my loans but not hers. The pattern is pretty clear, Dad. I had never heard Emma speak to our father this way. She had always been the agreeable twin, the one who rarely rocked the boat. Seeing her stand up for me with such clarity and conviction brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I didn't realize you felt this way, our father said to Emma, genuine surprise in his voice. Because you never asked, she replied simply. You assumed I was fine with receiving more than my sister. I never was. My mother approached, sensing the tension in our small circle. Is everything all right? She asked, her social smile firmly in place despite the concern in her eyes. We're having an overdue conversation about family dynamics, Emma informed her, specifically about why you and Dad have consistently provided me with more support than Lily. My mother blinked rapidly, her composure momentarily faltering. That's hardly appropriate dinner conversation, Emma. When would be appropriate, Mom? I asked. Because in 28 years, you've never acknowledged the disparity. We supported you both as you needed, my mother insisted, echoing my father's earlier defense. No, Emma said firmly. You supported me as you thought I needed, often at Lily's expense, and neither of you ever bothered to ask how that made either of us feel. My parents exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by Emma's unexpected alliance with me. They had always counted on her compliance with their family narrative. Perhaps this isn't the best venue for this discussion, my father suggested, glancing around at the nearby guests who were trying to pretend they weren't listening. That's convenient, Emma observed. Whenever Lily tries to address the inequality, the timing is never right. My mother's social mask slipped further, genuine distress showing through. Emma, please, we're celebrating your accomplishment tonight. We're celebrating both of our accomplishments, Emma corrected firmly. Lily is a Westbrook Fellow. Do you even understand what that means? It's the most prestigious position a new neurosurgery graduate can receive. One person in the entire country. And instead of being over the moon proud, you're worried about the social awkwardness of having to acknowledge her success during a party you planned exclusively for me. I had never loved my sister more than in that moment. For years, I had carried the weight of our parents' favoritism alone, never realizing that Emma saw it too, and apparently resented it on my behalf. My father ran a hand through his silver hair, a rare gesture of discomfort from a man usually so composed. Of course we're proud of Lily, he said, lowering his voice further. We've always been proud of both of you. But you show it differently, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. That's the problem, Dad. The way you express pride in Emma is tangible. Celebrations, financial support, active networking. The way you express pride in me is theoretical at best. You say you're proud, but your actions tell a different story. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Lily, that's not true. We've always been... Always been what, Mom? I interrupted, years of suppressed hurt finding voice. Supportive? When you skipped my research presentation to attend Emma's student leadership ceremony? Encouraging? When you dismissed my perfect MCAT score but celebrated Emma's above-average one? Generous? When you're standing in a restaurant you rented to celebrate paying off her loans while mine remained untouched? A heavy silence fell between us. For perhaps the first time, my parents seemed to be actually hearing me, not dismissing my perspective or offering justifications, but truly listening. Dr. Nadim appeared at my side, her timing impeccable as always. I apologize for interrupting, she said, though her expression suggested she knew exactly what she was interrupting. Dr. Chen, Dr. Farber was hoping to discuss the research transition timeline with you before he leaves. Of course, I said, grateful for the escape. As I turned to go, Emma linked her arm through mine. I'll come with you. I'd like to hear more about this research that impressed the Westbrook Committee so much. Together, we walked away from our parents, leaving them standing in stunned silence. Thank you, I whispered to my sister as we crossed the room. Long overdue, she whispered back. I should have said something years ago. Why didn't you? I asked, genuinely curious. Emma sighed. Guilt, I think. I knew I was benefiting from their favoritism, and part of me was afraid that if I pointed it out, I'd lose those benefits. That's not a pretty thing to admit, but it's the truth. Her honesty was refreshing. And now? Now I realize that their favoritism hurt both of us, she said quietly. You, for obvious reasons. But me too, in ways I'm just starting to understand. They never pushed me to be self-sufficient the way you had to be. They never expected excellence. From me the way they did from you. In some ways, Lily, their lower expectations of me became self-fulfilling. This perspective had never occurred to me. I had always seen Emma as the beneficiary of our parents' preferential treatment, never considering that it might have limited her in subtle ways. For what it's worth, I told her, I think you would have excelled with or without their extra support. You're more capable than they've ever given you credit for. Emma smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. Look at us. Finally having the conversation we should have had years ago. As we rejoined Dr. Farber and Dr. Nadim, I glanced back at our parents. They remained where we had left them, heads bent close together in intense conversation. Whatever the outcome of tonight, something fundamental had shifted in our family. Dynamic. The carefully maintained narrative they had constructed about their daughters was unraveling, challenged not just by my unexpected professional triumph, but, more significantly, by Emma's unexpected alliance with me. For the first time, they were facing a united front from their twins, forcing them to confront the inequality they had fostered for decades. Different, but equal, Dr. Farber suggested, his piercing blue eyes fixed on my father. An uncomfortable silence followed. The question had cut straight to the heart of the issue. Had my parents valued their daughters' different paths equally? My father, accustomed to verbal challenges in the courtroom, recovered quickly. Exactly so, he said with a confident nod. Equal in our esteem, though different in their talents and needs. But Dr. Farber wasn't finished. Interesting, he said, his tone thoughtful. In the medical profession, we strive to provide equal opportunities and support to talented physicians, regardless of their specific path. The basic foundation should be equitable, even as specialization varies. My father's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, Helen and I have always provided a strong foundation for both our daughters. A foundation that included paying off one daughter's loans but not the other's. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, quiet enough that only our immediate circle could hear, but clear enough to hang in the air like a challenge. A startled hush fell over the small group of departing guests. My mother's face paled, while my father's complexion did the opposite, flushing with color. Dr. Wu looked between us with sudden understanding, while Dr. Farber maintained a carefully neutral expression. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, my father said in a low voice. Why? Emma asked, surprising everyone. We're celebrating tonight, aren't we? Celebrating how both your daughters are starting their medical careers debt-free. One, through your financial support, and one through her extraordinary academic achievement. Isn't that worth acknowledging openly? My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. In that moment, I realized they were finally beginning to understand they couldn't control this situation with their usual social management techniques. Of course, my mother said after a moment, her voice slightly strained. We're incredibly proud of both our girls. Though you've shown that pride very differently, I added quietly. Dr. Wu cleared her throat delicately. Well, this has been a lovely evening. Congratulations to both Dr. Chens on your impressive achievements. I look forward to seeing your careers develop. With tactful timing, she and her husband made their exit, followed by several other guests, who sensed the family tension. As the crowd thinned, Dr. Nadim approached our small circle. I believe it's time for us to depart as well, she said. Dr. Farber has an early flight tomorrow. Dr. Farber nodded agreement. Lily, we'll be in touch next week about the logistics of your transition to Baltimore. I'm looking forward to working with you. He turned to my parents with a pointed look. You've raised a remarkable daughter in Lily. Her work will change lives. Thank you, my father said stiffly. We've always encouraged Lily's academic pursuits. Encouraged, but not supported. In the same way you supported Emma, Dr. Nadim observed, her directness surprising even me. A curious choice given her exceptional talents. My mother's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. That's unfair, she said, her voice wavering. We've supported both our daughters in the ways they needed. Have you? Dr. Nadim asked, simply before turning to me. Lily, I'll call you tomorrow. We have much to discuss about your research transition. After a round of goodbyes, Dr. Nadim, Dr. Farber, and the other medical professionals departed, leaving just our family and a few lingering relatives in the private dining room. The restaurant staff had begun discreetly clearing tables, the celebration officially winding down. My parents stood together, looking suddenly older and uncertain in the aftermath of the evening's unexpected turns. Emma moved to stand beside me, a united front that clearly unsettled them. Well, my father said after an awkward silence, this was certainly an eventful evening. More honest than we're used to, Emma replied. Another silence fell. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice quiet and hesitant, so unlike her usual confident. Social tone. Did you really feel that we favored Emma all these years, Lily? The directness of the question caught me off guard. After decades of deflection and denial, my mother was actually asking about my perception. Yes, I said simply. I have felt that way since we were children. And you never said anything. My father observed, a hint of his attorney's analytical detachment returning. I tried many times, I countered. You always dismissed it or changed the subject. Or told me I was being too sensitive, Emma added. I brought it up too, Dad. Multiple times. My parents exchanged startled glances. You did? My mother asked. Emma, of course I did. It made me uncomfortable. Still does. My father ran a hand through his silver hair, a rare gesture of discomfort. We never intended. That is, we thought we were doing what was best for each of you. Based on what? I asked, the question I'd been longing to ask for years. What made you decide that Emma needed more support, more attention, more everything? My mother looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. You were always so self-sufficient, Lily. Even as a baby. You could entertain yourself for hours, figure things out on your own. Emma needed more guidance, more reassurance. So you punished me for being capable, I said quietly, and rewarded Emma for being dependent. It wasn't punishment, my father protested. We just allocated our resources where they seemed most needed, and never considered that I might need the same emotional support and recognition, even if I didn't demand it as vocally, I asked. The question hung in the air between us. For perhaps the first time, I saw genuine reflection in my parents' expressions. Not defensive justification, but actual consideration of my perspective. I think, my mother said slowly, we may have misinterpreted your self-sufficiency as not needing us as much. I always needed you, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Just because I found ways to succeed without your support doesn't mean I didn't want it. My father's lawyer persona had fully receded now, leaving just a parent confronting a painful truth. Lily, I don't know what to say. We really believed we were being fair. By paying off only Emma's loans? I challenged. By celebrating only her debt-free status? By consistently treating her accomplishments as more worthy of recognition than mine? The loan decision was financial, he said weakly. We didn't have enough to cover both. You could have split it, Emma pointed out, echoing what I had said earlier that day in their kitchen. Helped us both partially instead of Lily not at all. Yes, my mother admitted quietly. We could have done that. Another silence fell between us, this one different from the tense, awkward pauses of earlier. This silence felt reflective, heavy, with realization. What happens now? My father finally asked, his usual certainty nowhere in evidence. It was a good question. After years, decades, of established patterns, how did we move forward from this moment of painful honesty? I don't know, I answered truthfully. But I think it starts with acknowledgement. Real acknowledgement, not justifications. My mother nodded slowly. I can see now how our actions might have seemed unbalanced. That was never our intention, but impact matters more than intent, doesn't it? Her use of the phrase, one I had tried to explain to them during previous attempts at this conversation, suggested she was truly trying to understand. The Westbrook Fellowship is extraordinary, Lily, my father said, making a visible effort to focus on my achievement rather than his discomfort. We should have reacted with unmitigated pride when we first heard the news. I'm sorry that we didn't. Thank you, I said, the simple acknowledgement meaning more than I had expected. Emma stepped closer to our parents. I think we all need to work on being more honest with each other. No more pretending everything is perfect when it isn't. It won't be easy, my mother admitted. We've had these patterns for a long time. 28 years, I pointed out, with a small smile. 28 years, my father echoed, shaking his head slightly. But perhaps it's not too late to learn new patterns. We stood together in the nearly empty restaurant, the four of us caught in a moment of rare authenticity. There were no easy solutions, no quick fixes for years of ingrained behavior. But for the first time, the inequality had been named openly, acknowledged rather than denied or justified. I'm moving to Baltimore in 6 weeks, I said, breaking the silence. That gives us some time to start figuring out what a more balanced family relationship might look like. My mother reached out, hesitantly, and took my hand. I'd like that, she said simply. Me too, my father added, his voice gruff with emotion. Emma linked her arm through mine. And I'll be staying here in California, keeping them accountable while you're conquering the neurosurgical world at Hopkins. For the first time that evening, perhaps the first time in years, I felt a genuine sense of connection with my family. Not the artificial harmony my parents had always tried to project, but something more authentic. A fragile, imperfect understanding built on painful honesty. 6 weeks later, I stood in my emptied apartment, the last boxes packed and ready for the moving company. Emma sat on the windowsill, watching me seal the final container of medical books. I still can't believe you're leaving next week, she said. Stanford won't be the same without you. You'll be too busy saving teenagers from acne to notice I'm gone, I teased, though there was truth in it. We'd each be immersed in our specialties, our paths diverging professionally even as we'd grown closer personally. As if I could forget about my Westbrook fellow sister, she scoffed, but her smile was tinged with sadness. Things are different with Mom and Dad, you know, since that night. I nodded, sealing the box with packing tape. I've noticed. They're trying. And they were. The changes weren't dramatic, but they were meaningful. My father had called weekly, asking detailed questions about my research and the move to Baltimore. My mother had helped pack, spending a full Saturday carefully wrapping. My grandmother's teacups that she'd originally given to Emma, but that Emma had insisted I should have. Small steps, imperfect efforts, but genuine attempts to rebalance a lifetime of inequality. "They're coming to help you move in, right?" Emma asked. "Yes," I confirmed, still slightly surprised by this development. "They've booked flights to Baltimore. Dad's taken 3 days off work." Emma smiled. "Good. That's how it should be." My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Nadim. "Transportation arranged for Monday. Dr. Farber looking forward to your arrival. Proud of you." I showed the message to Emma, who nodded approvingly. "You found the mentor you deserved," she observed. "When our parents weren't giving you the recognition you needed, the universe sent Dr. Nadim instead." "That's a nice way of looking at it," I agreed. "It's true, though. Sometimes the support we need comes from unexpected sources." She paused, then added quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't do more earlier. I saw what was happening, but I didn't know how to fix it without making everything worse." "You're helping fix it now," I assured her. "That night at Castellanos, having you on my side made all the difference." Emma hopped down from the windowsill and pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm always on your side, Lily, even when we're on opposite coasts." As we embraced, I reflected on the strange journey of the past 6 weeks. What had begun as a bitter recognition of inequality had evolved into something unexpected, a catalyst for honesty and, potentially, healing. The Westbrook Fellowship had given me more than professional recognition and financial freedom. It had inadvertently forced a long-overdue family reckoning. My parents had paid off Emma's student loans, but not mine. That inequity had revealed a deeper pattern that had shaped our entire lives. But now, finally acknowledged, that pattern had the possibility of changing. I would begin my fellowship at Johns Hopkins not just as Dr. Lily Chen, promising neurosurgeon, but as Lily Chen, a woman finally stepping into the fullness of her identity. Professionally recognized, personally validated, and increasingly at peace with her family history. "Dr. Lily Chen, Westbrook Fellow," Emma said proudly, stepping back from our hug. "You earned this, every bit of it." And for the first time in my life, I fully believed it. Not just the professional accomplishment, but my worthiness of recognition, of support, of being seen for exactly who I was. "Yes," I agreed simply. I did. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.